In a world gone mad, only one man, okay, maybe more, had the courage to ramble on incoherently. The show is up and the reviews are in. This is the show that many people have described as good. Uninterrupted, Wednesday nights on Tag TV. We're good? Okay.
Hi kids, welcome to Uninterrupted, the show where we might go past an hour today because there was a lot of news. However, you wouldn't know that if you were watching any of the mainstream news sites this week. So, there's so much to get to that we might not even mention the fact that Canada might be getting a brand new terrorist in Jihadi Jack. I know, you think, a new terrorist, get your checkbooks out, but we have more to get into. The SNC-Lavalin scandal, I'm going to make the case for why it is the biggest scandal in Canadian history and why it had effectively tried to turn Justin Trudeau into a dictator. We'll just go into that statement later. Now, Huffington Post is up in arms, claiming that Maxime Bernier claimed with no evidence that political Islam or Islamists have sway within the Canadian political system. We will examine Huffington Post's claim and see if there's any legitimacy to what Maxime Bernier said. Also, I want to go into the very, very stupid election laws that are currently in Canada. And it's been really funny because environmentalists are mad because Maxime Bernier's stance on climate change has made it so they'd have to register as a third party to go for the election. It's all very convoluted, it's all very draconian, none of it really represents Canadian or democratic values, and all rail against the machine to see, but I'm not really sure how allowed I am because of the election laws. So you'll want to smash your head through a window like I do every single day. Also, we have Islamists protesting in Toronto, getting violent, and of course the media portrays it as, you know, just it was a fight. You know, they assaulted someone. You know, a fight. You know, Indian man's head assaulted Pakistani fist. Seems reasonable. What else we got? We got news about the debates. I want to get into the failure of the media and how it's sort of the media's job to save us from SNC-Lavalin, which it will not do. And Hamas versus Donald Trump. And by Hamas, I mean Rashada Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. All right. People have been saying things around SNC-Lavalin like, oh, it represents Canada selling out to multinational corporations. Oh no, the real problem is the whole cover-up. And I'm going to make the argument that no, the biggest part of the scandal was actually what the scandal is about. So to recap, there are three major issues with SNC-Lavalin scandal, or there are three facets to the SNC-Lavalin scandal, and they're all huge. The number one, and first thing that happened, and this is what Elizabeth May and the NDP are really hitting on, and to be fair to them, this is a very, very legitimate claim within itself. It's a huge part of the scandal. It's why it's a gigantic scandal. You wouldn't know that if you watched the media. But their claim is that we're selling out to SNC-Lavalin. SNC-Lavalin is basically able to buy political access into the Canadian government. That's a problem. That's true, and that is a problem. And this is because SNC-Lavalin personally lobbied Justin Trudeau to get the deferred prosecution agreement put into law. That way, if they could use that law to pay a fine instead of getting a criminal fee, and then they could continue to get government contracts for the next 10 years. Now, to note, this is not a problem with the Canadian government. This is a problem specifically with Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party because they tried the same thing with Stephen Harper and were refused. Also, Stephen Harper created the Independent Prosecutor's Office. So this isn't a problem with the Canadian government. This is a problem with the Liberal Party, which is now in charge of the Liberal government. You've also been hearing things from the, the more conservative mainstream media figures like Andrew Coyne and Rex Murphy have sort of made the case, and again, this is a legitimate case, that the real part of the scandal, the biggest part of this scandal is actually the subsequent cover-up of it, right? The sort of the shushing and how the banana republic behavior of the Liberal Party in response to the scandal. And you saw that on display today, where they voted down a motion to bring the ethics commissioner in to testify on his findings. And I'm going to go into why the ethics commissioner should have been brought in a minute. But this is, the sort of the higher intelligence claim of, there's really, the silencing and the works in the media and the denialism and it represents the arrogance of Justin Trudeau and sort of the, ineptitude of the general, arm of the media to sort of hold the politicians to account. And to an extent, that is a major part of the scandal. And those are all major scandals in their own right. However, I made the case that this is the biggest scandal in all of Canadian history. And, some people tried to get me on, oh, it's a technicality in the Pacific scandal of John A. Macdonald and whatever. And if your argument is you're making a big deal of nothing, it's just the second biggest scandal in Canadian history and the biggest scandal in 140 years, not 150 years, then that's a pretty thin case to be made, even if you're right. But I think this actually is greater than the Pacific scandal and all other Canadian scandals. To recap, the Pacific scandal was John A. Macdonald basically took private money, right? The first part of the SNC Lavalin thing, took private money from a corporation to finance his campaign. Then he gave them the contract to build the Trans-Pacific Railway. Okay. Bad. He was out of government, then he came back into government. Scandal. I'm not saying it's not a big scandal. The reason why SNC Lavalin is the biggest scandal in Canadian history is because it would concentrate all the powers of government under a single office, and that is dangerous. So I made the case that America is predicated on the separation of powers. So in the American government, which most people are familiar with, and they tend to think our government is like American government, but regardless, the strength of the American system is the separation of powers. You have the legislature, which legislates. There's two branches because it's important. You have the House and the Senate. That makes Congress, right? Then you have the executive. Their job is to sort of enforce the laws. They have veto power over these laws, but they actually don't write the laws. This is sort of the problem with executive orders. Then you have the judiciary, which decides if those laws are constitutional, if they don't abide the Constitution. And all these branches of government are supposed to check each other so no one can take ultimate executive power and start becoming Caesar of America. Right? This is why you can have someone like Donald Trump just tweeting random things from the White House, and the America's really fine because the system is built to handle, Donald Trumps and the like. But the problem with SNC Lavalin, or the major problem with Canadian politics, is our legislature and our executive branch are concentrated into one. Meaning the Prime Minister is also part of the House of Commons. Now, the Canadian Senate is the most useless body on the face of the earth. You might as well just replace it with the Canadian flag. It would be more patriotic and more useful, right? And we'd have to pay it less. So ignore the Canadian Senate. They're useless. But you have the Prime Minister, who has a majority government, essentially being part of making the laws and then, executing them, right? So the legislature and the executive is concentrated into one. So right away, the only check to their power is an ineffective Senate, which is asleep most of the time. And then you have the judicial branch. And Canada has its own problems with, super legislatures in the judiciary. Regardless, but this is why the Canadian Constitution is so adamant on the separation of the Attorney General and the Prime Minister, right? This is why when Gerald Butts said, oh, no inappropriate pressure was put on Jody Wilson-Raybould. Well, the appropriate pressure amount is 0. You can't have appropriate pressure put in because the line between democracy and dictatorship in Canada is a very, very thin one, and that line is the Attorney General. And that's why Stephen Harper created an independent prosecutor, because he saw how thin that line was, and he knew one day the Liberals would get back into power, and they would do some Justin Trudeau shenanigans. So here we have Justin Trudeau, who is essentially, the scandal is the fact that he was putting pressure on the Attorney General to get special laws passed for his friend. But if Justin Trudeau is allowed to get away with this, which he might, because David Lametti, if the Liberals win the next election, they will get away with this. David Lametti will push through, SNC will get what they want, this scandal will go away, and no one will hear about it by the time 2023 comes around. It just won't. So you have a very, very, very thin line in Canada, and that's the Attorney General. So the fact that Justin Trudeau was putting coordinated, consistent pressure on the Attorney General to overturn her decision, to not overturn the independent prosecutor's decision, is incredibly alarming, because if we set the precedent that the Prime Minister, if a law that he doesn't like is being passed, he can just shuffle out the Attorney General, right? Kick out the Attorney General, get a new Attorney General, and then he basically controls the judiciary as well. So this makes Canada a quasi-dictatorship in the way that it's still a democracy, but we're just electing dictator to dictator to dictator to dictator. Right? The whole point of the American Revolution, the American Constitution is, it would have been great if we could outlaw slavery like that. It would. But the problem with that is you would give someone the power to snap their fingers and make a law. And when someone has the power to snap their fingers and make laws, they can do terrible things, right? That's the ultimate power. You're creating a weapon that's too powerful, which is why it took a long time to outlaw slavery. And this has its positive and negatives. But in Canada right now, what you're seeing is the line being completely shorn apart. So if the Liberals get back into power, which they might, because Andrew Scheer looks like he has no intention of winning the next election, or at least trying to. I think he wants to. I just think he's taking horrible, horrible, horrible advice. If he wins the next election, you can pretty much kiss the balance of power in Canada goodbye. We're just gonna go from super legislator to super legislator to super legislator. And if you don't think that's a terrible idea, I point you to every failed state in the world, right? So when we talk, we had great. You can find countries and have revolutions on amazing ideas, right? The French Revolution, equality, fraternity, liberty, great ideas. But they gave someone the power to do that, and Napoleon happened. The Haitian Revolution, arguably a more morally pure revolution than the American Revolution, although it was based on the American Revolution, right? There was literally a class system, blacks and whites and mixed people, all in these different race and caste by wealth and race and people togetherness and equality and whatever. What's the problem? Great ideas, but they gave someone the power to snap their fingers and make laws. And it fell apart. So that's what we're facing in Canada. We're actually facing a massive crisis that people are asleep. People are asleep at the wheel on this. And the Conservative Party is trying to, they're doing it's corporate interest and look at Justin Trudeau, The argument that people really need to understand, and I think this is the fault of the media, and I think the Conservative Party as well, and all political parties, and I've heard a lot in the media, because again, I watch the CBC every day now. I've been hearing a lot in the media that, Canadians just, they don't understand the SNC Lavalin. It sounds too complicated for them. They don't get it, which is bullshit. They understand it. The only reason they don't get it is because it's not really being explained well in the media, in any media. Right? The only people who understand it are the people who are actually looking into it. It's not that they can't understand it. And this is the argument that the Conservative Party needs to make. Because they need to make the argument of, look, we have a democracy. You need a separation of the legislature and the judiciary and all these different things. And if you concentrate all these powers into office, right, that's how you get Caesar. Right? And Justin Trudeau essentially sees himself as a dictator. And I don't think... let me phrase that. I don't think he sees himself as a dictator, but I think he sees himself as everything a dictator does, but he's the good guy. Because I don't think that people ever see themselves as the villain. And this is true. I think, most people, like Hitler is one of the most evil men in all of human history, but I think that Hitler probably saw himself in a light as the good guy. And when people see themselves as the good guy, it gives them the moral justification to do such terrible things. So because Justin Trudeau sees himself as this morally pure, I'm going to save the planet, I'm going to save everyone from Stephen Harper, blah, 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 this makes him much more dangerous than if he was just twirling a mustache going, yeah, 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 I'm going to tie your Mounties to a railroad, yeah. Right? That guy's actually less dangerous than someone who believes they're morally pure and doing all these things. So this is the argument the Conservatives need to be making onto why SNC Lavalin is such a major, major scandal. Because when you start to make these arguments, they're pro-liberty, Canadian constitutional arguments, and you need to build support for that because that grows your party down the line. Because I've been saying for years, the reason I vote Conservative is because I'm a liberal. I had a friend phrase it in a nice way that we need to vote Conservative in order to act liberal. And this is true, right? This is liberal, these standard liberalism, right? Standard libertarian liberalism, constitutional, that's why you should vote Conservative. But you have the Trudeau acting like a total dictator, right? He's the man who said he admires China's basic dictatorship. And the whole party's corrupt with this, right? Today, they voted down a motion that would bring the ethics commissioner in to testify. And they said, we probably wouldn't learn anything. Hello? I mean, there's still some questions to be answered here, right? What was the extent of the obfuscation or the obstruction that he faced? Because he said he was being obstructed when he tried to investigate. Wouldn't it be nice to know? The Prime Minister himself has said the phrase, I respect and I support the findings of the commission, but I disagree. Well, where do you disagree with? Right? We need to air these disagreements. Right? If you disagree with the findings, the Prime Minister said he disagrees with the findings, the Liberals disagree with the findings, then don't we need to hear this out? Right? We have an ethics committee to monitor ethics violations and elected an ethics commissioner. The ethics commissioner found ethical violations, but that doesn't seem to be any interest to the ethics committee. Does anyone buy that? No, they don't. So I want to shift this to my next point, which is the fourth estate or the media. we talked about the three branches of government and how they're important, right? Executive, legislature, and judiciary. The reason we have the fourth estate, right, the supposed fourth branch of government, the check on all these branches, the fourth check to power, is the media, right? The media. Oh, we're journalists. We're doing great jobs. We're journalizing. Yeah, we're out there. We're getting the truth. Pew, 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 pew. Right? The CBC, defending truth and justice. How would anyone ever know anything without them? So we are in a scary place where the balance of power in our country is literally in the hands of the mainstream media, or the media at large. I mean, there's a reason why I'm trying to do what I'm doing. So there's two failures to the media here. There's the literal failure, as in they're failing economically because no one watches them anymore because they're BS, and there's a moral failure, or a failure of duty of the media. So I think they're connected. So the reason they're failing has a large part to do with, better resources. Now you can watch a show on the internet. You don't have to go to the television. Anyone can sort of pick up a cell phone and do what I'm doing. Don't do what I'm doing. I'll get you. That's not a threat. If anyone interprets it a threat, just remember, I'm a minister for the Pakistani government, so I'm allowed to threaten journalists, okay? So, cool. Now, the media should be the last check and balance to power here, right? I've explained. And this makes the scandal even bigger. It shows the other branch of the Liberal Party, the CBC, is also failing here. Right? When all three branches of government have failed, when the executive is in bed with the legislature and the executive and legislature work to overrule the judiciary, in public view, it should be the job of the media to use their powers to stop this. However, they are not. They have no interest in doing it. Now, again, I've watched an hour of CBC for this entire week. SNC-Lavalin wasn't on the news on Monday. It lasted less than a week in the news cycle. Now, it'll come back up. But the major story I heard, now they did do some good coverage of SNC. It wasn't all bad, and I reported when it was good, when it was bad. But the thing I heard the most on the CBC was, well, the sort of political games of SNC. And you see the Liberals are now hitting on this note. And they were saying, well, it's the Conservatives' job, right? I talked about it. CBC openly said, well, it's the Conservatives' job to keep SNC-Lavalin in the news, and that's why we're having this ethics committee hearing, and it will help the Conservatives keep the scandal in the news. And they're saying, well, because the more Canadians hear about SNC, they will do worse than the Liberal poll numbers, and the Liberals want to get rid of SNC. And they were sort of not talking about the scandal, they were talking about the gamesmanship of Conservatives and Liberals. So then they go to report that, not a lot of Canadians really understand the story. And instead of saying, hey, you know what, is that a failure of the media? This is a major scandal in Canadian history, and people don't understand it. Now, they took the pathway that Canadians are stupid, that's why they don't understand, and we don't need to talk to them because, they don't get it. I think they do. So they took no, it's Canada's fault, it's Canadians' fault. They didn't take the other branch that, you know what, this is a major scandal in Canadian history. And the public doesn't seem to be well enough informed on the inner workings of the scandal. Who's supposed to inform the public? It's the fourth estate. It's the last check to the powers of government. But they're completely asleep at the wheel here. Now, you could say, okay, this is the CBC, there's other private news sources, but there's not going to be any more private media anymore, because that's Justin Trudeau's game, right? They're getting the $600 million bailout. So the Liberals are going to buy the media. It's in the budget. It's in the budget. $595 million to bail out the dying fake news media. So this is the second failure of the media. And it's going to make it worse because it's going to add to the first failure. So the second failure is the literal failing, right? It's dying. And I've gone into the reasons why. It's stupid advertising laws where, whatever. You can fix the media by just taking away some ridiculous regulations on advertising that make them non-competitive instead of subsidizing them. But the goal is to subsidize them, not to actually save the industry. And the reason they want to subsidize them is because if you look at the CBC's coverage, it's pretty pro-government, except when it's Harper, right? It's been, infested with leftists up the wazoo. Now, I actually have no problem with Global News or CTV News being biased, whatever. It's a private company, can do what it wants. However, it's about to start taking my money. It's about to be a publicly traded company, a government-subsidized industry. So the threat of the government buyout is, well, what are the incentives for them to cover SNC-Lavalin properly? If you're at CTV News, if you're at Global News, and you give proper coverage and you really explain the failures of the three branches of government and the corruption of Trudeau and the interest of lobbying, if you explain all three major assets to this scandal properly to Canadians so they understand it, Well, they're going to vote this guy out. They're going to say, oh, no, we can't have that. No, got to vote him out. Right? But then if you vote him out, you don't get that sweet, sweet, sweet bailout money. Right? And what's more important? The health of our democracy or money? Right? And no one sees the problem here. And again, I watched the CBC where they literally did a story on the National on Monday night on Andrew Scheer. And they covered Andrew Scheer, and they said he's giving a reduced price to journalists to follow his campaign. It's smart. He's the opposition. He has no policy failures that he's had because he hasn't been in government, so he wants to get as much news coverage as he can do. Try not being really boring. But he wants to get a lot of news coverage. So he's offering journalists a discount to follow him around, $11,500 compared to about $45,000 NDP are charging. And the CBC was in outrage mode. Does this mean Andrew Scheer is subsidizing the media? Is this illegal? Could this potentially sway media involvement? We're going to look into it. Keep in mind, the CBC has not reported the fact that the government is going to be giving the media $600 million. That didn't tickle their journalism senses. But the fact that Andrew Scheer is going to make them pay $11,500 instead of like $40,000, that gets them up on range. So the reasons why the media is failing literally is, one, okay, there's stupid regulations, and I've talked about that. Two, the bigger reason is because people don't trust them. There is not a lot of trust in the media, and there's a lot of good reason not to trust the media because they're not giving you the news properly. They're biased. This is how the mainstream media works, and I'm going to show it on another issue very later in the show. They have a story, and the story fits the narrative. And then once they have the story, they go out and start to do reporting. This means before they go and investigate, they have the story. And this is what we saw in the protests in Toronto this week. They had a story, it fits the narrative, and they go. And they saw evidence that contradict the story, just got omitted, and then the story went out anyways. The story was made before it happened. And people are starting to see this. And the reasons it's failing is because it's failing at its duty. There are stupid government regulations because the government is stupid and regulates everything. And third, competition. You can now get this show. Subscribe. Like the page. Subscribe to the YouTube. Like my face. Get a tattoo of my face onto your face. It's a great face. Do all that. Like the video, share the video, something, something, something. It all helps out. And it all helps destroy the CBC in a roundabout way, which is what we're trying to do for Canada and the world. So this is the major problem in Canada and in the world. You're seeing it in India, you're seeing it in America, you see it in the UK. The media is failing at its job, and it does not form the function of the fourth estate. And in Canada, instead of trying to fix these problems, the government's come in and said, you know what? We're going to double down on making it worse by injecting a bunch of bailout money into them to keep them reliant on the government. So now it's all fully corrupt. And then they're going to act surprised when this blows up in their face because they're idiots. All right. Let's move on to another Canadian story. The Huffington Post has been reporting that Maxime Bernier has been saying crazy things like Bernier claims Islamist extremists have infiltrated Canadian politics. Where could he ever get this idea? Now, what they talked about in the article, and this is a Huffington Post article, it's written by, what's her name, something Raja, but this is, I'm pointing her out because she's going to be moderating one of the debates. Commie McWhat's-her-face. She's on CBC all the time. She's like, I'm not a liberal, I'm not NDP, I just think, communism. Blah. She's a bit more articulate than that, but it's essentially lefty garbage. So it's four lefties and one centrist are going to be the debate moderators, and you wonder why people think the mainstream media is fake news. So crazy Maxime Bernier is saying things like Islamists have infiltrated Canadian politics, Islamist extremists. Is there any evidence of that? Is there any evidence on this page? Remember the story we did on Khalid Rashid? Now, if you don't remember Khalid Rashid is an MPP for Mississauga East in Ontario. He works for Doug Ford. Now, Doug Ford is the big boogeyman. He's going to get you. He's so evil. He's a racist. He's an Islamophobe. He's a thisophobe, a thatophobe, a whateverphobe. He's eating kids, eating teachers, eating the teachers' union with a side of kids. Oh, God, Doug Ford, let's all panic. Also Islamophobia. Khalid Rashid has just been promoted within his party. Yes, he's now promoted. Deputy Whip Khalid Rashid, not just regular MPP. Now, why is Khalid Rashid interesting? Because Khalid Rashid has some very interesting ties to some very interesting people. You can look up the video on this page, but I'll just give you some spoilers. He goes on in Parliament, so he's standing in government, in Parliament, as a parliamentarian, and he goes on to thank the Kazaz Foundation, founded by Khalid Al-Kazaz, and Sarah Atiyah. Now, Khalid Kazzaz was part of the Muslim Brotherhood government in Morsi. Yes, the Muslim Brotherhood government, from the producers of Muslim Brotherhood, gives you Muslim Brotherhood government. Now, his wife, Sarah Atiyah, was the founder or vice president of the Muslim Students Association in Canada, another organization with alleged ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. She left to go to Egypt when Mohammed Morsi came into power, again the Muslim Brotherhood, saying that Egypt was now a better place to raise kids. You're right, Egypt, in the middle of a revolution and violence run by the Muslim Brotherhood, is a better place to raise their kids. Now, the Kazzaz Foundation helps integrate Arab-speaking individuals into Canadian society. Why is this a problem? Because the Kazzaz, or Mr. Kazzaz, spent time in jail for being part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, Khalid Rashid thanked the Kazzaz Foundation for three things. Three things they did. One, they stood up for democracy. Fun fact, when the Muslim Brotherhood came into power, they outlawed other political parties. That type of democracy, yes. Two, his commitment to social justice, known as leftist gobbledygook. I don't know why that's important to a conservative. And three, his commitment to equity of outcome. Yes, where everyone gets the exact same result, also known as literal communism. So again, Sharia-based autocracy, social justice, and communism are the reasons why we're thanking them. And this guy is a conservative. Yes, no infiltration there, that's not evidence. The Liberal Party, with Omar Al-Ghabra. Omar Al-Ghabra, what's he was? Okay, I mean, former head of Canadian Arab Foundation, which lost funding and charitable status for systematic support of terrorism. He doesn't think Hamas and Hezbollah are bad organizations. Again, those are terrorist organizations. But more importantly, Omar Al-Ghabra is on record in Ontario. In 2006, a motion that would allow Sharia courts to open in Ontario, yes, literal Sharia law, was defeated. And it was defeated by some pretty prominent Muslims. Ironically enough, Ahmed Hussein was one of them. But also Tahir Gore, Rahil Raza, and Ahmed Hussein were quite instrumental in defeating Sharia law coming in Ontario. Now, what was Omar Ghabra's stance on this? He was, and I quote, very disappointed that Ontario did not allow Sharia law. He sounds like a very interesting figure. Now, we also have the fact that the Canadian government is sending tax dollars to some very questionable organizations. The ISNA, which just lost charitable status for a third time for a third terrorism funding violation. Oh, and this is going to get real fun because this is all going to connect very soon. So, we're going to talk about Kashmir in a bit. We've talked a bit about Kashmir. Fun fact, you remember that bombing in India that killed 44 people in Kashmir that was supported by Pakistani jihadi-based group, Jayat al-Jash? Well, they shared a training compound funded by the ISNA. Oh, coincidence? I think not. Now, the ISNA recently got over $25,000 in summer jobs funding from the federal government. Problem, maybe? I mean, again, the same federal government that said, yeah, you're a terrorist organization or you're supporting terrorism. No charitable status for you. Also, here's a bunch of money. No, yes, there's no problem with Islamist extremism within our government. And again, the ISNA, that was their third terrorism violation. Also, you want to know about their executives? Just Google a man named Sirhaj Wahaj. Find out what his views are. And again, this is Sirhaj Wahaj Sr. Sirhaj Wahaj Jr. was in the news. They have the same name, it's confusing. If you remember the name, Sirhaj Wahaj Jr. was the man found with the 2 terrorist training camps in Alabama and New Mexico, the one where they kidnapped the kid and they died. You know the one where they were teaching them to commit school shootings for jihad reasons? That's Sirhaj Wahaj. Well, his father, who was an unindicted co-conspirator in the first World Trade Center bombing. I know, people who want to blow up the World Trade Center. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, then let's go into Islamic Relief Canada. So there's currently a lawsuit going in against them. They get tons of money from the Canadian government. In fact, there's only been 2 organizations that Justin Trudeau has openly supported. One is just Mohammed Faiq, the owner of Paramount Fine Foods. And 2 is Islamic Relief Canada. Oh, there's a picture of him and everything. I'm sure you've seen it by now. Now, Islamic Relief Canada has some very interesting connections. For example, the government of the UAE, United Arab Emirates, says that's a terrorist organization. And before you say that's Islamophobic, United Arab as in Arabs, Emirates. They say, no, they crazy. No. Israel, government says they're a terrorist organization funding Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, as does Canada. But even more ridiculous, the government of Bangladesh says that is a terrorist organization. We don't deal with it. Now, the government of Bangladesh is a Muslim-majority country. Here's some interesting fun facts. Let's see how functional this government is. So, there's the refugee crisis, the Rohingya, which we're now paying attention to, and the Myanmar. and they're under siege, and there's ethnic conflict. All you need to know is refugee crisis. Who's taking in the most of the Rohingya right now? It is Bangladesh, a Muslim-majority country. They will not allow Islamic Relief to operate within their borders and give them money. They won't allow Islamic Relief to just give them money because of terrorism and extremism concerns. However, the Canadian government gives Islamic Relief money to deal with the Myanmar Crisis Relief Fund. That's right. The Canadian government is now partnered with who? Islamic Relief Canada to help with the Rohingya crisis. So the government that's dealing with the Muslim majority said, no, we won't even take free money from those crazies. And the government again is like, here, we'll give those crazies free money to deal with the refugee crisis that they're not allowed to deal with because they're crazy. Other programs that give Islamic Relief money, International Humanitarian Aid Program. The government gave $1.5 million to Islamic Relief. The M103, Islamophobia, Iqra Khalid. She gave, of the $23 million allocated for funding, the only identified organization was Islamic Relief. More government money. The Canadian Summer Jobs Program. Islamic Relief also gets money from the Canadian Summer Jobs Program. As we said, the Myanmar Crisis Relief Fund. Canadian Humanitarian Assistance Fund. They get almost $300,000, that Islamic Relief, that is, from that fund. So Canada's Humanitarian and Development Assistance to Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon. Yes, part of that money, millions of dollars, goes there to Islamic Relief to, and I quote, help women's rights. What rights are those? The rights to be treated like it's the 7th century, apparently. Oh, goody. So, to recap, Maxime Bernier has made this crazy accusation that Islamists have Islamists have influence in the Canadian government. And I don't know where he gets that idea from. It's not like there's a mountain of evidence, both physical and video evidence, of them doing just that. But instead it's crazy Maxime Bernier saying crazy things like the truth. Oh, gotta love it. Gotta love it. Gotta catch them all, Islamists. Okay. Another crazy thing Maxime Bernier said that we're all up in arms about, and I find hilarious and lovely, is Maxime Bernier took a different approach on climate change. He basically said, this climate hysteria isn't scientifically valid. And they said, no, the science is settled. That's why we're all going to die in 12 years. Sorry, we're all going to die in 5 years. No, wait, we're all going to die in 3 years. No, wait, we're all going to die in 18 months. Now, Elizabeth May said, no, we're all going to die in 3 months. So remember, the science is settled. That's why the data changes once a month. Maxime Bernier pointed this out. And now, environmentalists are angry because Elections Canada has ruled that you can't be, if climate change is now a partisan issue, you can't run ads about it. And if you do run ads about it, if you spend more than $500, so you put anything on TV, you'd have to register as a political third party, and there's not enough time to do that before the election. And this is stupid. And to be fair to the hippies here, this is stupid. This is a stupid law. And the Trudeau government has changed the election rules, and it's so, like, this law affects me personally. And so I'm not even sure what I'm allowed to say about it because it might violate Election Canada law. Needless to say, if I was a Russian, I could say whatever I want about Canadian politics. I could do whatever I want. And if I was being funded by Russians, I could say whatever I wanted. But if I was getting money from Canadians, and as a Canadian I wanted to say things about Canada, then I'm not really sure what I'm allowed to say because it's all so convoluted. To be fair to Maxime Bernier here, he came out and said, this law is stupid. And I was so lovely to see the CBC say, well, it would be like, could doctors not say smoking is bad if one of the candidates said, yeah, smoking isn't so bad? And I would say, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. This law is stupid. But instead of saying, maybe we should look at how stupid and anti-democratic and anti-libertarian Canadian laws are and actually work to sort of get rid of all these dumb regulations that hold our society back. No, let's blame Maxime Bernier for saying things like, shut up, you stupid hippies. Not his exact words, but I interpret it as that. You know what Maxime Bernier should say? And Andrew Scheer should say this also. You know what? I want any politician that says climate change is not caused by carbon emissions. Climate change is caused by drag queen story time. Done. Vote for that man. How funny would that be? That would be amazing. That would bring all the issues. It means we couldn't talk about anything. Right? Pride flags cause climate change. Boom! Now we can't have any of that. Now you got to pay to advertise. And it's ridiculous, and it's not. But it might show the left how ridiculous their draconian laws are when you try and censor conservatives. And this all started because of Ontario Proud. And so what the real issue here is they're called super PACs in America. You kind of know what they are. And they're called political third parties in Canada. And for years, we've had tons of liberal super PACs or political third parties and NDP ones, mostly through union funding, but there's been a couple dozen highly funded Canadian super PACs, and they've just been liberal for years. Then in the last couple elections, some conservatives decided, you know what, if the Liberals are going to do it, we're going to do it too. And things like Ontario Proud was started, where they just regular conservatives started to pool their private resources and do advertising better than the Conservative Party, because the Conservative Party is inept at advertising and selling a message and just generally trying to export Canadian values. So private citizens did it. And it was effective, because conservative values are actually quite popular when articulated properly. And then the media panicked. Oh my God, what if Canadians are just allowed to, have views about Canadian politics without regulation, then people might not believe the exact same thing I believe right now. Moral panic ensued, and more panic ensued, and then we have these ridiculous laws where you're not allowed, you have to register as a party, and you can't advertise for more than $500, and you gotta do this, and you gotta do that, and you can't be, right? If you were a Russian oligarch, you can give Justin Trudeau $1 billion to do whatever you want. But if you're Canadian, there's all these crazy rules that you can't do things. So all these rules to panic over conservatives ended up biting them in the ass. And that's hilarious, because screw the media and screw those dumb hippies. Okay, let's talk about something. All right, so I promised you this story. So a protest in Toronto has turned violent. You might be thinking, is it the Hong Kong one? No, the Hong Kong protest has been covered every day on the Canadian news. And for the most part, the coverage has been okay. There's just two major omissions. They haven't shown the pro-American faction to the Hong Kong protest, because that might show that people actually see America in a positive light, and they got to portray the image of America evil and bad. And they have not said the magic word. Do you know what the magic word is? What type of government is China's? What type of government? Communist. Yes, you have never heard the phrase communist government or communism being said. But other than that, it's been good. And there's even been protests in Toronto, and there's been counter-protests on that. And that's been covered to the nth degree, every single day. Right? These protests have received exponentially more coverage than SNC-Lavalin, even though they don't really deal with Canada, quasi-somewhat need to do with Canada. But a story that is not being talked about is these Kashmiri protests. So, earlier this week, there were protests outside the Indian embassy, where Sikh Khalistanis started waving Pakistani flags. And of course the Palestinian movement showed up, and then the Pakistanis showed up. And the Khalistanis were saying things like Allahu Akbar and this and jihad on India. And all these anti-Indian protests are ultimately funded by the Pakistani government. And they're funded by the Pakistanis, because who benefits from discord in India? It's their enemy, Pakistan. So there's no coverage of that. No coverage of that, because then we might have to deal with some uncomfortable issues, like why are the Khalistanis waving Pakistani flags and talking about jihad against Hindus? Is that because they might be paid by the Pakistani government, and maybe the Khalistani movement, which committed the worst terrorist attack in Canadian history, the Air India bombing, isn't a good movement? Maybe they're the bad guys. Maybe the people blowing up airplanes aren't our friends. Let's ask Raj Gurwal. Raj Gurwal is an interesting fellow. He's a Liberal MP. Now, you might remember him, Raj Gurwal. Yes, he was the MP that was about to resign because he had hundreds of thousands of dollars in gambling debt. And then he decided not to resign because his debt disappeared. Like that. Poof, went away. Where did it go? Let's ask Raj Gurwal's uncle, who you can find on video in the 1980s holding an AK-47 in Pakistan, shooting it off, talking about committing committing terrorist attacks. What's the difference? Against India. Very interesting fellow, the Gurwals. How are they so connected in Canadian politics? So we have problems with extremism in Canadian politics. Yes, we do. If you don't believe me, ask Raj Gurwal, ask Ukra Khalid, ask some questions to Omar Al-Ghabra, look at Khalid Rashid. All these wonderful figures. I have to talk about. But here's something that did get covered. And this got covered in CTV News. We don't have time to show you that whole video, but this was covered in CTV News as a fight breaking out between two sides. As the classic sort of, two people, they disagree here. Now I'm going to show you the part of the video. You can look at the CTV coverage of the Kashmir protests. Then I'm going to show you the parts of the video that they would have seen, but purposely edited out. So the man in white is the lone India supporter in this video, and he's surrounded by all the Pakistanis. So here's the man in white. He's there beside the police. He is just saying pro-India stuff, and okay, there he's pushed once assault. He's pushed once, and oh, now he's punched. So he's been assaulted physically. All right. So here we have, this is what the media calls a fight. Now this is a Pakistani blogger. We don't know what he's saying because it's not in English, so he's saying squiggly line, squiggly line, squiggly line, squiggly line, squiggly line, jihad, jihad, something, something, squiggly line, squiggly line. Now we go back, and we see again. So we see the guy from India, and he's standing there, he's yelling back, he's making his point, and then a man coming up from behind him, and he's spitting on him, spit on him again, spit on him 3 times, spit on him a 4th time. And see, the man from India has not assaulted anyone. He's not touched anyone. And here are the police. Oh, and who are they? What are they doing? Oh, they're pushing him back, right? So, again, there's only one man who was assaulted or pushed around during this entire protest, and that was the lone India supporter. He was pushed around and punched by a Pakistani supporter or Kashmiri right in front of the police. We saw a punch there. Nothing happened to that guy. Right? Pushed the 2nd time, and then pushed the 3rd time to the police, and then spat on by another Kashmiri or Pakistani supporter. So there were 4 potential assaults, right? Again, and we're not going to talk about police brutality now. And that's not police brutality. But 3 assaults on this guy. He assaults no one on video. And it's a fight. A fight broke out. A fight broke out, right? A fight. It's violence on both sides. Cycle of violence. You know, see, it's just like, you know, the Palestinian issue. It's a cycle of violence. A Palestinian puts on a suicide belt, walks into a supermarket, blows himself up. 1 Palestinian dead, a bunch of kids dead. Cycle of violence. See, they were fighting each other, right? They both got hit by the same explosion, right? But 2 people died. Oh, it's a wash. So this is what I said before. The media came into this having a narrative. And the media is not pro-Pakistan. It's not pro-Kashmir. It's not pro-Palestinian. It's not even pro-Muslim. It's not pro-trans. It's pro the narrative. And right now the Pakistani stuff fits the narrative. And the second the Pakistanis support and the second pushing Pakistani propaganda doesn't support the narrative because the intersectional left changes on a whim, then screw Pakistan because they're dead to us. And that will be the media's MO here. And during the coverage, they said the things like, all right, a fight broke out. And then when they covered it, they only covered the Pakistani, again, they gave the Pakistani propaganda side. They said, oh yes, there was a lockdown in Kashmir, and they let the Kashmiri people say, oh, there's violence against the family, and the Indian army is committing a genocide! A genocide! And this is the exact same genocide that's happening in the Palestinian territories. Now, for record here, the population is increasing in both these areas. Population is increasing, which means India and Israel are terrible at genocides. You know, if you're going to commit a genocide, the goal of genocide is usually to reduce a specific population. When the population increases, I generally fall on the side of that's not a genocide. And it's the same type of genocide. What is a genocide? Well, it's radical Islamists aren't allowed to murder Jews and Hindus. And because they're not allowed to murder rampantly, that's considered genocide against them. And again, they didn't cover the Indian side. If you want to say stuff like, oh, Modi is evil and Indian army is doing this in Kashmir, then you have to say Article 370 repeals laws that make it legal to rape kids. It's no longer legal to rape kids. Also, women in Kashmir, if they marry a non-Kashmiri person, they immediately lose citizenship in all their land. That law has been taken away. Also, all the Pakistani jihadist groups. Again, we talked about the fact that there was just a suicide bombing in Kashmir, which was basically through an ISI terrorist-funded group, Jayat al-Josh, which is another problem there, right? There's rampant Pakistani-backed terrorist groups who trained at the same place connected to the ISNA in Canada. Well, the ISNA is also an American thing, so that's more a North American problem. Right? None of that gets mentioned. Not a single word from the Indian point of view. So this is the bullshit. It's like, oh, there's a cycle of violence, there's 2 different claims. You know, what is Pakistan's claim to Kashmir? Pakistan's claim to Kashmir is an Islamist claim. They say there are Muslims in Kashmir, which is legally Indian territory, but because there are Muslims there, if Muslims there aren't run under Sharia law, it is oppressing the Muslims here in Pakistan, and therefore it is Pakistan. That's a ridiculous claim, and it's a nonsense claim. And also, Kashmir is a mountainous region. It is a military significance, and there's tons of jihadis there. You can't just give jihadis the mountains, because they're going to use them to kill your people. Now, you can't let them kill your people, because killing people is bad. So again, to recap, India is committing a genocide in Kashmir. This genocide is consisting of increasing populations and not letting the Muslims kill the Kashmiri Pandits. So no mention of the real genocide done against the Kashmiri Pandits, most recent one in the 90s. Instead, we're talking about a fake genocide, which is a genocide where they're not allowing people to commit a genocide. Got it? Okay. The media, 101. And we wonder why people don't trust the media. So welcome, India, and people to the global support group for people against globalist nonsense. You have North American conservatives, Israel, and now India in what the hell is the media doing? These liars need to be stopped. So welcome, India, to our little coalition of screw the UN. This episode is brought to you by Daniel's petition of deport the UN. How does that work? We don't know, but just if you're in New York, find a friend, grab a shovel, dig the UN out of the ground, and toss it into North Korea where it belongs. The UN, what a bunch of pedophile, terrorist-enabling assholes. I think that covers it. So please like, share the video, join the page, subscribe to the YouTube, whatever you do, you know, it helps us out here. All right. So let's get to the number one story in America now. Again, so Donald Trump is in a bit of hot water for saying ridiculous things. Now, the media and Linda Sarsour, Al Jazeera, all of these people are starting to say Trump is pushing the dual loyalty claims of Jews. And okay, Trump said something stupid, but that's an everyday occurrence. Trump always says something stupid. He's a bit of an ignoramus. That's kind of how he works. Sometimes there's awesome tweets that are hilarious. Sometimes there are ridiculous tweets that make you want to grab the phone and throw it out the window. That was one of these, right? And Trump retweeted an Israeli thing basically saying he's the king of Jews, and he's the second coming, and all this nonsense. And he basically makes the case that Jews who vote for the Democrats, it's out of disloyalty. And this is sort of, okay, the dual loyalties claim. This is anti-Semitism. All right. So a lot of things can be true at once. Trump used some bad rhetoric, and claiming Jews have dual loyalties is an anti-Semitic trope. But this is also media hypocrisy. So, when Rashad Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and the rest of Hamas went out and pushed the dual loyalties claim to the nth degree, really pushed it, right? AIPAC money and Jewish money has infiltrated American politics, and that's the only reason there's pro-Israel, right? That's dual loyalties and anti-Semitic conspiracy. Jews control the world through money. That's two anti-Semitic conspiracies, right? The media ran cover for them. It was in the news, right? This was really Islamophobia. The Democrats couldn't even sanction it. And then Trump does this thing of, Jews need to vote Jewishly for him. Okay, and that's bad. Now, a lot of these are true at once. Conservatives rightfully ripped Obama and Ayanna Pressley for doing this. So in 2016, Obama said, out of loyalty, talked to the black community and said, if you want to show loyalty to me, vote for Hillary Clinton, right? He said, blacks should be loyal to me and vote for Hillary Clinton, right? This is essentially the same thing Trump did, right? So, yes, two things are true. It's hypocritical for Republicans to not criticize Trump if they criticize Barack Obama, and if they criticize Ayanna Pressley for saying that ridiculous thing, right? We don't need Muslim voices that aren't Muslim, gay voices that aren't gay, brown voices that aren't brown, black voices that aren't black. This is essentially what Trump said. So you can't diss Ayanna Pressley for that statement, say that statement is bad, and then when Trump says it, oh, it's fine, right? And that's it. But okay, this is what the media is doing. It's fine when Ayanna Pressley and Barack Obama do it. It's completely fine. That's good. Now it's bad when Donald Trump does it. That's disingenuous. It would also be disingenuous if you say, it's good when Trump does it, and when Ayanna Pressley and Barack Obama do it, it's bad. But something else needs to get to the bottom of this. And I don't really like sort of determining, whether something's racist or anti-Semitic based on like just the words being used. There has to be more to the context, right? We just can't get a hot button word, right? You said disloyalty, that means anti-Semitism is this, right? So there's a pattern behind it. So Ilhan Omar and Rashad Tlaib represents the Hamas district in Michigan, and Ilhan Omar is from the 4th district of Qatar, I believe. See, I just did it to them, right? And this is a joke, but I'm making a joke of what they vote for politically. Now, they came into power saying they didn't support the BDS movement, right? Boycott, divestment, sanctions. They didn't really support it. They didn't think it was the best way to go. And they were in favor of the two-state solution, right? That's what they campaigned on. Then they get elected, and Rashad Tlaib says, there is no Israel, destroy Israel, it's all Palestine, everything's Palestine. And Ilhan Omar comes out and starts pushing the boycott, divestment, sanctions nonsense. And boycott is like, we need to boycott Israel. Now, fun fact, if you're trying to boycott Israel, you're a hypocrite because you're not doing it. Every smartphone on the planet has at least 30 Israeli patents in it. So if you're taking selfies, or you're doing what the BDS people do in Toronto, where they live stream themselves putting up anti-Semitic stickers around the city, well, you're using Israeli technology to boycott Israeli technology, you dolts. But then they can't even support this. Now, it's illegal. Israel passed a law saying you can't come into the country if you're going to promote BDS movement, because the goals of the BDS movement, as said by the BDS people, is to destroy Israel. So Israel won't allow people into the country with the express goal of trying to destroy the country. Makes sense. And they were going to make exceptions to the 2 American congresswomen, and then Trump started tweeting that they shouldn't do it, so then they put Netanyahu to bind, then he said, okay, we're not going to do it because we can't, lose Trump on this. Okay, fine. But here's the problem with just going off words, because Omar and Tlaib are anti-Semitic, not just by them pushing the dual loyalties, but by them actually living by that principle, them consistently pushing it, them wanting to destroy the Jewish state, them never condemning a suicide bomber in their life, them legitimizing the rioting and the terrorist attacks on the Israeli border. Right? All of that mountain of evidence makes them anti-Semitic. Now, Trump says stupid things, invokes words that can be probably misconstrued or construed in an anti-Semitic way. However, Donald Trump has been a staunch supporter of the global Jewish community, has vociferously fought anti-Semites, and his daughter, and his favorite daughter, and Jared Kushner are Orthodox Jews, right? So he has Jews in his family. The mountain of evidence on Trump is not anti-Semitic, just says crazy things sometimes, whereas Rashad Tlaib and Ilhan Omar is consistent pattern support for anti-Semitism, right? The Women's March. The Women's March, which, let's just disregard Linda Sarsour, who open ties to Farrakhan, supports Louis Farrakhan, said the reason why it was the Zionist media and the Jewish media that's making us think about Louis Farrakhan and her, right? Jews control the media, right? All the things. The second Women's March movement was going to be put on, but one of the legal orders was going to be Resma Oda. And Resma Oda is a terrorist. She is convicted and admitted to placing a bomb in a Jerusalem supermarket that killed 2 students. She is an anti-Semitic terrorist who has murdered Jews. Linda Sarsour and all the Women's March did the I Stand with Resma, and they were all backed Resma Oda, a terrorist who murders Jews. So this is the difference here. Now, again, bad language by Trump, but this is Trump. In order to determine who's racist and anti-Semitic, look at maybe not the 1 or 2 words. They say that's a bad way to book people, but look at their actions. I think actions are always more important than words, and every action that Ilhan Omar and Rashad Tlaib have taken has been anti-Semitic propaganda. Every single one. Right? I really wish Rashad Tlaib actually cared about the Palestinian people, or at least cared about the Palestinian people more than she hates Israel and the Jews. I really do. Because if Rashad Tlaib, it's a real shame that she's now the face of the Palestinian movement. Because there was a real chance for peace with a Palestinian-American congresswoman coming in if she wasn't a radical. Because if she truly cared about the Palestinian people and truly cared about peace and didn't have all these ties to terrorists and extremists and whatever, she would have got in and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to get Palestinians to sign a peace deal. Because as of 2008, there's a peace deal on the table. Full statehood for Gaza, full statehood for the West Bank. You get 97% of the West Bank, and we'll give you, of the 3% that would go to Israel, we'll give you equivalent land swaps. So Israel has had on the table for 70 years now a peace deal that would allow a Palestinian state to be created, even though there's no legal claim to one and Palestine is a fictional character anyway. Still, the Israeli government's official position is, you want a state, sign this piece of paper. All you have to do is sign the piece of paper, acknowledge Israel exists, and you don't want to destroy it, right? You have to acknowledge that we exist and no more terrorist attacks. And that's too onerous a condition for the Palestinians. No, we keep on blowing ourselves up. Exploding is our favorite thing. Right? It's the fundamental tenet of their culture is terrorism. It's a terrorist culture. Don't believe me? The highest paid people in the Palestinian territories are terrorists. They have a martyrs fund, as it's called. There's a scaling. You commit a terrorist attack against a Jew, the government pays for it. People celebrate it. They hand out sweets. Mothers of terrorists are euphoric for the kids. There's tons of these videos going around. The Palestinians have been at the forefront of innovation of terrorism for their entire history, since 1964, when an Egyptian terrorist named Yasser Arafat went to Jordan, ripped the star off the flag, waved it around, and invaded Palestine. Oh no, Palestine's been around for billions of years! Name me one Palestinian president, prime minister, king, governor, something. Name me something about the country or province of Palestine prior to 1964. Name me one person. Name me one leader. Give me one thing. Prove me wrong, right? Anyway. Suicide bombings, invented by Palestinians. Airplane hijackings, invented by Palestinians. Car rammings into civilians, invented by Palestinian terrorists. Probably the greatest regret of the Palestinian government is that they weren't the first ones to think of flying the planes they hijacked into buildings. That's probably the biggest, that's probably what they're slamming their heads over now. You can make the argument very legit that it's the most anti-Semitic society in all of history, even more so than Nazi Germany, which murdered 6 million Jews. Because when the Nazis murdered Jews, they at least didn't want to admit they were the bad guys. They put those out in the country, right? They weren't putting in the newspaper, we murdered 10 million Jews today, we killed this many Jews, look at this massacre we did, right? It was behind, they didn't tell the public about it. But every time a Jewish child is killed in Israel, the Palestinians talk about it and they celebrate. There's street parties. It's a culture built on an anti-Semitic bloodlust and an adoration for terrorism. And Rashida Tlaib could have called this out, or at least could have presented a different front. But instead, she's just like the worst of Palestinian society, which is a terrorist society at its core, because they pay terrorists to kill Jews. They do. And they are subsidized by Western governments to do so, of course. All right. We don't have a lot of time, but we're going to go over time today, as I promised. Again, we didn't even get time to mention Jihadi Jack. Yes, Jihadi Jack, get your checkbooks ready, because he's probably going to come to Canada. Now, that's probably only if Trudeau wins the election. My prediction is on October 22nd, if Justin Trudeau wins, Jihadi Jack can book a ticket, get your checkbook ready, because we owe him at least $10 million. Why? Look how sad he is. We need to write him some poems or something. He could be a powerful voice for de-radicalization, you know? But I want to talk about something more important. I have made the case that in the next 50 years, the second leading cause of terrorism worldwide, behind terrorism for peace, of the religion of peace, will be environmentalist terrorism. And I said it has all the makings of a terrorist organization. 1, hardline doomsday rhetoric, and 2, anti-human attitudes. So, the 2 recent terrorist attacks, El Paso and Christchurch, evil terrorists, all right? And white supremacist terrorists. I'll call a spade a spade. White supremacist terrorists. Both of them, in their manifestos, have cited some sort of eco-fascism, right? The Christchurch person called himself an eco-fascist, and the El Paso shooter basically did some racist logic of, there's not enough resources on the planet, that's why I got to kill the Mexicans to save the resources for the whites. This rhetoric is evil, because racism and murder are evil, but it's also economically wrong. It's dead wrong, and I want to get to this. And there's a very, very real danger in the environmentalist movement, and the danger in the environmentalist movement that will seep into wider society, and it already is its anti-human attitudes. And you see this all over the place, right? Are kids bad for the world? Exhibit number 1, Prince Harry. So Prince Harry and what's-his-face, Miss American actress. Prince Harry says he's only having 2 children maximum for the sake of the planet. Oh, stunning and brave. Stunning and brave. Stunning and brave. Brave and stunning. Oh, thank you, Prince Harry. But, okay, that's just one idiot prince. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Let's see what the CBC has to say. Sorry, Canada. Not having children, a way to cut person's carbon footprint, some environmentalist groups say. Right? You see these stories all the time. This is Canada's national broadcaster, right? Best way to reduce carbon emissions, have fewer kids, researchers say. Right? So it's not just some environmentalist groups saying, now it's scientists. Research says, science says kids are bad. Look at how cute they are. You think those are evil. And it's not just Canada. What are they saying in the United Kingdom? Right? Here's The Guardian. Does climate change make it immoral to have kids? Immoral to have kids. Now, 1, if you really are worried about having kids, just try and look like that guy Dave, because that is the best form of birth control, look like that. So if you're really worried about the planet, just look fat and ugly like that balding dude. And that's probably the best form of birth control, right? You save the planet by being so ugly. Good for him, hero. Again, stunning and brave. So there's the evidence. And I could have found 50,000 articles like that from different countries, right? I saw something in the National Post, is having kids immoral? So let's just look at the direct logic here, right? What are the priorities of the environmental movement? To save the planet or to save the people on the planet, right? If your priority is the people on the planet, then it's not immoral to have kids because there's nothing wrong with human beings. But instead, we're getting this anti-human attitude where we got to save the planet. Okay, the planet's been hit by asteroids with like the power of 1 billion nuclear bombs. The planet will survive. it might die off. There might be species that die, but then will die, and then new species will come. This has happened. There's been life cycles before. There's been mass extinctions. The planet will be fine. We can't hurt the planet. The planet could wipe us out. Planet more powerful than human beings. But here's the problem. This type of attitude, this anti-human attitude, is seeping into the culture where, oh, overpopulation crisis, oh, this, right? This is Thanos. And I've been saying, if you didn't watch Avengers Infinity War, Thanos, oh, I need to destroy half the world with a snap to save the other half of humanity. And they touched on the genocide is bad part, but they didn't touch on the, actually that's economically illiterate of you to say. As I said, the best Avenger would have been Milton Freeman. If Milton Freeman was an Avenger, right? All we need is not an Avenger who can control thunder or super strength or a genius. We just needed an Avenger with the superpower to explain basic economics to people. And then that would have avoided the whole Infinity Saga. Thanos would have gone, oh, resource production and human freedom. Okay. So this is like the Thomas Malthus, the population bomb. This theory has been popular among people forever. The population is increasing. It's increasing, and we're all going to die in overpopulation and starvation. This isn't true. Standard of living has increased, and our population density has also increased. This has never come to fruition. People keep making this argument, oh, the population is going to get us. It never has. I remember as a kid that we were told that peak oil, right? We only have 50 more years of natural resources before it all goes away, right? It's all going away in 50 years, so we have to find something else to do. No one says that anymore because it's no longer true. We innovate ourselves around that. So when I was a kid, right, there was 50 more years of oil, and we got to find new solutions. Now there's enough natural gas the way we use it that my children's 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 children are in no threat of running out of energy supplies with the way we're using it. And that's if we don't even make any innovations on the way we're using energy now. And the reason why this overpopulation crisis is nonsense is because of this exact reason. If human beings have freedom to create and keep their own innovations, right? If there's innovative markets, then we innovate ourselves around problems and we increase resource capacity. Increased human freedom leads to increased resource capacity. So we now found natural gas, right? We've now found ways to get natural gas deposits out of the ocean. And again, natural gas is more efficient and cleaner than oil, so it burns more. That's why it's cheaper and it's better and it gives you more power. Oil was cleaner, the same thing to coal. That's why we don't need coal anymore, because we have natural gas. Right? Are you telling me, right? So we had 50 more years of oil the way we're using it. Then we found natural gas. Then we found innovations. Then we found more efficient ways to use these resources. Now with just exploring 1% of the ocean and finding natural gas there, right? Even if we don't find anything in the other 99% of the ocean, we now still have enough natural gas and resources in energy-wise to use it for about 10 to 50,000 years. And that's if there's no innovation on processes or no new ways of finding energy. Right? And I'm assuming we're going to innovate. But here's the problem. This is where the environmental movement comes in, because the environmental movement isn't serious. It's not serious. Look at the Green Party of Canada. The Green Party of Canada is against nuclear energy. It is against nuclear energy, which means it's not serious. Right? It just wants wind farms, and it wants to power with wind and sun and hugs. Right? The Green Party is only interested in energy if it comes from hugs, and we need to strap a turbine on drag queen story time, and that will power the planet. That's the essential core of the environmentalist movement right now. It's not serious. It's a joke. Right? Recycling. There's a video on this page. Look it up. Recycling is a joke. It's an absolute joke. But it's dangerous because they're pushing the humans are bad for the planet thing. And the reason why it's dangerous is you see it in these terrorist attacks. So what do you need for a terrorist attack? For most terrorist attacks, you need some sort of justification for your actions. You need moral justification. So when the Taliban goes into a girls' school and releases chemical weapons, or goes into a day school and starts shooting up the place, a Taliban spokesperson basically justified this, saying, okay, if they're really innocent, they would go to heaven and be with Allah, and then they're fine. Right? So the justification is the Taliban is right. Okay? The best way to run the world is like it's the 6th century. That's why women learning is bad for everyone, so we can kill a bunch of schoolgirls, right? Because we're morally right. But also they're not really dying. If they're innocent, God sorts out the victims, so we're not really killing them. It's good for the greater good, right? Now, the environmentalist, anti-humanist version of it provides justification for certain terrorist actions. So I'm not saying, the Christchurch and El Paso are because of environmentalism, right? The primary motivation is white supremacy, right? It's, whites are the superior race, Spanish people or Muslims are doing this against the whites, what an evil racist nonsense, okay. But then the other half of the justification you saw is there's limited resources, right? If I don't kill these people, right, other people are going to die. Right? It's sort of a utilitarian, pragmatic approach. It's wrong, as we just discussed. But it's the approach being put, right? There's all these Spanish people, and there's all the white people. I'm on team white people. And there's only a certain amount of resources to go around. Thanos is right. And if Thanos is right, then I want those resources to go and keep white people alive. So by massacring a bunch of Hispanic people, I'm going to end up saving white people down the line. That's why this anti-human element is dangerous, because it provides justification for murders for wackos. And if you don't think that environmentalist movement is going to turn violent in the next 50 years, you're crazy. Because you get this doomsday rhetoric, right, where the world's going to end in 12 years, then it's going to end in 5 years, then it's going to end in 3 years, then it's going to end in 18 months. Now it's going to end in 3 months is the most recent nonsense. Right? You're scaring people with these priests. Catherine McKenna, the Archbishop of Climate Change. Right? You're scaring people, providing rhetoric. Right? Doomsday. The world's going to end. There's a doomsday point. Right? This is a war, right? The lives are at stake. And we can't have too many people because people's carbon footprint. Stop having babies. Babies are the problem. You're selfish if you have babies. Right? What's the logic here? The logic is people are bad. We need less people. And when you tell people we need less people, don't be surprised when crazy people say, how do we get rid of the people? I know, kill people. So that's my biggest problem with the environmentalist movement. It's anti-human, and it's wrong. It's straight up wrong. Our resource capacity has increased. We'll innovate our ways out of this if given time. And what we're doing in Canada is instead stifling innovation. We're putting in more regulation. We're over-subsidizing green industries, which means they're not going to be able to innovate, because we're just throwing billions of dollars at like Samsung and multi-billion-dollar windmill corporations. They're just throwing up windmills, which make no sense, and taking their money and going home. People only innovate if there's need to, right? Necessity is the mother of invention, and we're taking away necessity, and invention will save us. So, eco-fascism, going to be the #2 source of terrorism going forward the next 50 years. You heard it here, folks. So that concludes this episode of Uninterrupted. We went 9 minutes overboard. That's not bad. I could have done an extra 2 hours because Jihadi Jack, and there's so much more. So thank you so much for watching. If you like the show, please like the page, or subscribe to the YouTube channel, or hit the notification bell, or like the video, or share the video, or just, you know what, go next door, get a tattoo of my face onto your face. And I'll see you all Thursday night. We'll do a special episode on something. I'll figure it out tomorrow. And then every week, every day, sort of watch along as I take apart the CBC and we, Rosemary Barden. Oh, Rosemary Barden's going to be on the debates. Ugh. So every day, I'll give you the worst CBC, the worst story, the most biased one, the biggest omission, and then I rate each episode on a scale of 1 to 10 Rosemary Bardens. Also, stick around because every Wednesday night, right here and on Tag TV, we do Uninterrupted, where I blah, 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 blah. You saw it. It was here now. Terrorism bad. See you next week.